Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Admission Diaries, where we get up close, personal with the students from top universities around the world. Today, we have an exciting guest who studied at one of the Ivy League schools, Columbia University. Please join me in welcoming Murtajiz Naqvi. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Murtajiz, it's lovely to have you. I'm just gonna dive in right into the questions so we get to hear more about from you actually. So why don't you tell our students, can you share what makes Columbia University unique, especially for someone aspiring to join the Master of Science in Applied Analytic program?
For sure. I think there's a lot of stuff when it comes to Columbia that makes it unique. You obviously have the entire Ivy League glamour and all of that, but I think one of the biggest things I think, and one of the reasons why I applied is the location itself. I think New York City itself is a very important aspect to any university experience that you have at Columbia. I think just because of the way that you get to interact with so many different people, the living experience is very unique. The way the campus is located. In addition to that, I think the student body is pretty diverse. I have met, I can't even count how many different ethnicities, cultural backgrounds I've interacted with. I understand that this is probably at other places as well, but like I said, I think in the case of New York, I just feel like culture maybe pops out more when you're here as well. People are very active and proactive in what means to them. I think, as you may have seen recently, this past year, Columbia has been in a lot of the news and conversations as well, in terms of students being vocal. And I think for someone such as myself, that was a very enlightening experience. I think I necessarily didn't expect it, but that was great. And I think in terms of the program specific, I think the program's pretty great. It's unique because when I was applying, I was looking at different analytical programs across the US. But in my case specifically, I didn't want something that was purely technical, and I wanted something that was kind of a mix of non-technical, technical, because I had come from a working background, and I kind of wanted to polish those skills as well. So there's like a good element of strategy there, leadership skills, networking. It's not an MBA though, that's what I tell people, but I think for a technical degree, it's probably as close as you can get to one.
Right. So what motivated you to choose applied analytics in Columbia, and how did the program shape your career?
In all fair honesty, like I said, I did my undergrad from LUMS, and I majored in management science, which is, I would say, similar in the sense it's a business major, but at the same time, you have some technical aspects. And then I worked 3 years after that. So throughout that, I worked in consulting, I worked in marketing. And I think during those 3 years, I kind of realized that I did well in roles where there was an element of like analytics to be used. And at the same time, there's like a non-technical aspect as well. Right. So which is why I think when I was looking at degrees, like I said, I wanted to find something that could kind of be an amalgamation of everything. I really liked the applied analytics program at Columbia when I was looking at where to apply. The fact that it's not too long a program, firstly, it's about a year and a half. And some people do it in a year. It's a 3-semester program. And the coursework's structured in a way that you kind of progressively develop your skills. That the first semester is much more introductory. Second is kind of when you're in the middle of it, and your final semester, the way the coursework is kind of brings everything together. And in terms of how it shapes my career, I mean, I am going to start working after this, so I'm not entirely sure yet. But the vision was to find a program that kind of enhances the current skill set I have, but at the same time opens the door to new areas, because I always thought that maybe I could do more in terms of learning languages, coding platforms. I think everyone knows that AI and analytics is very much the rage these days.
Yeah.
And I wanted to understand and learn in those fields as well. And I think the program has done very well in at least providing a working understanding that I can now take forward.
Wow, okay. Can you walk us through the key steps of the admission process at Columbia? I mean, any tips for
Uh,
applicants to make their application stand out?
so in terms of the key steps, I think it is honestly it's similar to other universities. I started applying. I think the deadline is very similar. I think it closes in January. They don't have rolling admissions. And yeah, I think you need 3 recommendation letters. I think it's mentioned that if you've worked for a few years, one of those could be from a manager, but
Right.
most of them are usually from faculty. And then yeah, I think I gave the GRE back then because I initially applied in 2021. Um, but I think over the years, I think the GRE is now optional,
Right.
but I'm not entirely sure on that. But I would recommend people researching. But a lot of people around me have given it GRE. So I think that's one key step that you should. I strongly believe in standardized testing, so I think you should give it anyways, because I feel like it helps your chances in comparison with students who haven't given it.
Right.
The program is unique because Columbia also does an interview in this. So I had a 1-hour interview with actually someone from the department itself. I think back then it was the associate chair of the applied analytics department.
Okay.
It wasn't too much of a, I would say, technical interview, just much more of like finding understand my vision is, why I want to join Columbia, what the motivation was for joining, and yeah, stuff like that.
Right. So how important is having a strong CV with relevant work experience? You said you've been working there as well, when applying to a competitive program like this.
So this was actually a key learning experience that I learned. I think it helps very much so. I think, but the fact that when I came here, I realized that this program specifically, and I think a lot more other programs that you see at graduate school, they are also like a lot of, I would say about 30% or 40% of my cohort is actually people who are fresh out of their undergrad,
Right.
and they're trying to pivot. So that was an interesting insight, because I think in Pakistan especially, or the way the consultants tell you, is that you should have a significant professional experience before applying for graduate school. But I realized that wasn't necessarily true, because I have a lot of like fresh undergrads here. But I think again that program to program, some programs specifically ask for it. I do think it did help my chances, because then you have like a mix. If I were to break up my program, I would say about 30% are fresh undergrads, and then about 50% of the program is experienced at 1 to 3 years, and then like 10 to 15% of the program is 5 years and above.
Right. So what are the most critical elements of compelling personal statement for Columbia University admissions?
Honestly, I think so. In my graduate school, I did not apply to too many places, but I did apply quite a bit in my undergrad, and I spoke to a lot of fellow alumni who were there.
Right.
I think the way that personal statements are nowadays, and a lot of people use templates. I know that a lot of people use external support. I mean, a bad thing to say, but I know a lot of people have started using the support of AI as well. I think that's not a great thing, but I understand where they come from.
Yeah.
I honestly think your personal statement really helps, because more or less when you're applying to these institutions, 80% to 90% of your profile will be pretty much the same as the other people. I mean, everyone's going to be smart. Everyone has a good undergraduate or a high school GPA. Everyone's done extracurriculars. I mean, they're maybe a bit different. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't use those, but your personal statement is something that can be entirely unique to you. And I think that's the only area in your application where you can actually kind of show yourself. It's like a cover letter, basically, when you're applying for a job. Talk about your motivations and what makes you unique, which the rest of your application will not be able to do so effectively. So I honestly think like a personal statement is very important. In terms of how to structure it, I mean, we could go into like the deep dive of that, but in summary, I would say, I just think do it yourself, be honest. Right. I see a lot of people are very afraid when they're writing personal statements. They're asking for support when help. That's fine. That's understandable. And then, but a lot of people then they stick to these fixed formats that some people have. That a format may have worked for someone else, and then people are like, okay, I'll use the same. But I don't think that's actually the case. I think you should be a good storyteller. I think that's important. You should be able to get your message across, and more importantly, I worked very part time, but I did college consulting back in undergrad for like a semester or two. Kind of as a part-time thing, but during that experience, I had the opportunity to read a lot of personal statements for people who were applying to LUMs, the UK back then for the undergrad. And yeah, I think when it comes to being whoever's reading your personal statement, they should be able to see who you are and what your motivation is. So I think that's my advice, but I may have been a bit over here and there, but yeah.
All right, you spoke about the extracurricular. So, how significant are the extracurricular activities in shaping an application's profile? I mean, can you share an example of activities that might enhance a candidate's application?
For sure, I think very important because, like I said, I mean, everyone's going to be smart. Everyone's going to have a good GPA. Everyone's going to have good grades. So your extracurriculars help. I think a more new theme that I've seen recently, and I think maybe it's been in the past as well, that having extracurriculars in general is great, but having extracurriculars more specific to the area you want to study is very helpful. I have a few friends in the sustainability management and climate school programs here. I know all of them volunteered at WWF, climate action forums before they coming here. Similarly, when it comes to policy students, I have friends at SIPA. SIPA is the Institute for Policy at Columbia, and a lot of them have worked with NGOs in the past. And similarly, I think there's some extracurriculars across the board which always show that you're a good candidate. Public speaking is one. Sports is always a great one. And I know when it comes to American institutions, they very much value at the athletics and the fact that it shows a lot of things. Being a good athlete not only shows that you're good at the sport, but I think the fact that you know how to function in a team, the fact that you can do well under pressure, the fact that you have that winning mentality. So I would say extracurriculars are pretty important. Examples, honestly, I think since I've been here, I've met a lot of impressive people in the fact that, I mean, they're all in the same program, but when you talk to them, you find out that someone used to row in their undergrad, someone's like a semi-professional hiker, someone's written 3 books by the time they apply for grad school. So I think whatever you have, I think that you're passionate for sure. And at the same time, if you can, I think this advice is great for high school students because they still have time. I think volunteering in areas that are more specific to the degree that you want to do really helps.
Right. Agree with that. And so how vital are the recommendation letters in your opinion? And what should the applicants focus on selecting when they're asking for references?
I think once again depends what stage of life the students are in. I think one general advice is that if you're a high school student, your referees would most probably be your teachers in school. Unless they have like extra, and if anyone has any extracurricular activities, I would always recommend maybe seeing like a football coach or a sports federation society, someone who can give you kind of that different recommendation. Maybe your debate coach. When it comes to university undergraduates that have finished their undergrad degree, I think in most cases for them it's their university professors. And then when it comes to people who have worked a bit, I would always recommend trying to include a manager there as well. I think when it comes to selecting your referees, a few key things. I think one is that always choose people that you think you work the most with and that they understand you better. Because sometimes you're in a situation where you can't find a referee, so you would reach out to someone who you had maybe one course with, or you take in a course, even if you don't have much of a relationship with them. But I feel like those recommendations, they come off more generic solely because of the fact that the professor doesn't know you that well, so they can't really write much. So I feel like asking people who know you well, who understand you more than just how many marks you got in their course, that really helps in selecting your referees. And again, I think coming back to what I said before, for people who are looking at specific programs, I think getting recommendations from referees that are specialists in those fields really helps. Like I know I have friends doing PhDs in the US now, and all of them got very specific recommendations. For example, if someone's going to study, like if someone's doing an electrical engineering PhD, then they reach out to those professors in undergrad who have taught similar courses that they want to do their doctorate in. Similarly, sometimes you would have professors that are from the same school that you want to apply to. I think that really helps as well, especially if this is probably not for someone in high school. This is more for someone maybe in their undergraduate right now, because there you have professors from different universities. But I've heard that always helps, because someone from that institution is then referring someone to at the same institution. So that really helps.
Right. And what were the biggest challenges that you faced during the application process, and how did you overcome them?
I think in my case, honestly, I was working at the time, so I think that was a big challenge. I remember before my undergrad, I think in your high school, like this is everything in life, like all day and night, you're writing essays, you're constantly reviewing them, you're studying. But in my case, I was working a full-time job. You have those responsibilities, but at the same time, all of this as well. I had to study for the GRE. I had to write university essays, which take time, I think. And you also realize that once you haven't written these in for a bit, it takes longer as well for you to kind of get started. So I think that was a big challenge in my case. I was fortunate enough that I was still in touch with my undergraduate professors, so getting recommendations wasn't that hard. But from other students, I have heard that they have struggled with that, because sometimes a few years pass and then they aren't in contact as much with their professors from them. So, but honestly, if I look back, I think one thing that I would recommend to everyone is start early, plan it out, make sure you know, like what I've done is I kind of have a checklist for every institution, because every college in the US would have similar dates, but like a different date. Maybe like Columbia is closing on the 12th of Jan, Harvard will close on the 13th, so and so on. So I think just planning it out, know what you have to submit, kind of make yourself a to-do list. That could really help overcoming the pressure of having to do all of this in a time crunch.
Agree. So what is life in Colombia right now? I mean, both academically and socially for you, and how can students make the most in their time there when they're there?
Honestly, I think it's been great. I think so I love the city. I think, like I said, I think the Columbia being in New York was one of the biggest reasons why I applied. And I think that really funnels in when it comes to the social life aspect, because there's so much going on constantly. The fact that you have events, you have concerts, you have movies coming out. You just have in general like really fun gatherings of so many different societies. I think New York is rightly known as like the global hub of arts and film and music and all of that. So I think that has really been a really fun part of the university. And the university really plays that well. Like you, as a Columbia student, you get, I've had the opportunity to see Broadway shows at a very discounted price. They've taken us to Yankees games a few times. We have on-screen campus screenings. I know that as a Columbia student, you can get film discounts. As a Columbia student, you get free access to a lot of big museums in the city, like the Met, the MoMA, which are some of the biggest museums in the world. So I think from a social life aspect, it's actually a bit much. Like I would say that you have to, like when I first came here, that you have to start in order to make sure that you're studying, you have to make sure that you prioritize academics as well. You have to say no to a few things, actually sometimes more than a few, just because of the fact that so much is happening. And and I think making the most out of my time here, I think the biggest aspect has been this. Whenever I meet new people, I was a tutor this year, and I was also a part of kind of like, I would say, the orientation program at my school. Okay. So I interact with new students, and I give this advice across the board. I think when you are here, whether if it's for 4 years or whether it's for a year, this is one of those cities and universities where you shouldn't take it easy. I think you should very much make the most out of your time. There's so much to see, there's so much to hear, listen to, sightseeing, adventure. And I think growing up, everyone's heard about how big a city New York is, Times Square, all of that. And I think being a student and it's probably the best way you can enjoy the city, because you don't have to worry about adult responsibilities and all of that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're living at the same place where everything is happening. And even on the campus, like, you have so much happening, so many people coming in. That's my advice. Yeah.
All right. What advice would you give to students aiming to get into Ivy League schools like Columbia, especially for specialized master programs?
Honestly, I would say this is probably a really good time at this point, because so many, I think post-COVID, maybe admissions were slowed down, people weren't applying as much. But now I look around, like, a lot of people are coming in, especially from the subcontinent. I understand, obviously, there's, from a economic perspective, that's a different situation because we're dealing with a significant currency difference. But I think at the same time, my advice would be, but you should take advantage that if you have plans in life to pursue higher education, this is probably a really good time to do it. I think when it comes to specialized degrees, I can speak for tech programs at least, because those I've seen in research and been a part of. I think it's a new wave. Institutions have, like, they've incorporated a lot of new AI concepts, Gen AI, analytical tools, which were not there maybe 3-4 years before. At the same time, I think the way I think the innovation industry is booming, every day we see something new coming out. So I think in light of that, if you are planning on studying in life, maybe this is a good point in time to do it. And I think advice in general is, I think one thing I've always noticed and realized is that when it comes to us Pakistanis, I think we have a very strong high school and even like an undergraduate platform in the country. I understand maybe our universities are not that well known outside of the country as compared to other institutions, but I think one thing I've realized that the training we go through, the curriculum that we have from an early school life, even till undergrad, it really trained us well to do good at these institutions when we come for our masters and everything. Because I think majority of my friends are Pakistani. Some of them did their undergrad here, but most of them are here for their masters from Pakistan. And I think one common theme I've seen throughout all of them is that everyone is doing very well, and they continue to do well after that as well. So I think my honest advice is just apply. I know a lot of people when applying, I realize that some people might disagree, and this may be a bold statement, but I don't think it's that hard getting into these institutions, especially at a master's level. I think at an undergraduate level, that is still maybe harder. Maybe they're much more selective. You're also maybe young, so I think that's a decision that you need to see for yourself. But when it comes to your master's degree at Harvard, Stanford, the Ivy League, big institutions, maybe Columbia, I genuinely don't think, in fear, I know a lot of people who will not just apply to these institutions because they made it in their mind that, oh, we can't get in. But I'm very much like, don't know that until you've been rejected.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's my advice at the end of it. I think just be brave, just plan it a bit better, uh, organize your information better, because we do so much as Pakistanis in school, in our universities, but you just need to document that better. Have a good relationship with your professors and talk to them beforehand, and that you have your recommendations signed up. And I think once you have all of that done, I think it's very straightforward. It's not that hard to get into the institution.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. With us, your story is truly inspiring, and I'm sure it will help a lot of students who are thinking about applying to grad schools like Columbia. If you enjoyed today's episode of Admission Diaries, make sure you like it to stay updated for more amazing stories. Until next, thank you, Mrs. Once again, and thank you, everyone.